Hand of Fate. Is it worth a buy? Let's read. Deck building comes to life in Hand of Fate, an infinitely replayable series of quests. Earn new cards, build your deck, then try to defeat it. In a cabin at the end of the world, the game of life and death is played. Draw your cards, play your hand, and discover your fate. Hand of Fate is a cross between a card game like Might and Magic and a dungeon crawler like Darkest Dungeon. You essentially are playing against a dealer, and you make your own big deck of cards and you play against them. I've never played anything quite like this before. It is really, really ingenious the way that this has come up. I'm not sure if there's been games like this back in the old days of Dungeons and Dragons, but I didn't do any of that, so I don't really know. But to me, this is all new kind of stuff, so I'm really, really intrigued by it. And what happens is you're given a set of cards to start with, and you get more cards as the game progresses, and you use these cards to progress through the game and defeat 12 bosses. Each game consists of a crawl through a dungeon with a boss at the end of it. So what you do is, your cards, the way I've seen it, are separated into two types. You've got consequence cards and you've got equipment cards, and you have to choose 14 of each before you enter into the dungeon. At least at the minute I'm 14. That probably goes up with the bigger dungeons that you come across. I'm not quite sure at this moment in time, but it doesn't matter, because it's, it doesn't really make any difference to the actual way the game plays. The game plays the same way. So you have to choose your cards before you enter each dungeon. It helps if you know what the cards are, but a lot of the cards you don't know what they do, because if you just acquire a new card, it won't tell you what it does. It'll just tell you the name of the card, so you have to kind of think, ooh, do I want to take that or not? Devil's Choice, is that a bad card or a good card? So you have to make a bit of a guess at what cards you take. But essentially, we'll start with the equipment ones. You need to take weapons, you need to take shields, you need to take armor, and you need to take artifacts, which are buffs, if you like. Like one of them might give you frost damage, which slows down the enemies, because there is real-time combat in this, which I'll come to shortly. But essentially, you equip yourself with all the best stuff that you can, really. Now, you might want to take a couple of swords, a couple of shields, and the reason for this is because you are not given these items at the beginning of your crawl through the dungeon. You have to land on these cards in the dungeon. So you might take one shield and not get it till the very end of the dungeon, which means you've gone all the way through the dungeon without a fucking shield, which I did. The other set of cards are consequence cards. Now, the consequence cards you land on every single turn. So what happens is, with the consequence cards, they will be things like, you see a weapon lying at the bottom of a gorge next to a dead skeleton. Do you go down and have a look? And if you say yes, you do, you then get a choice of 4 cards which come onto the screen. 3 of them might be failures, 1 of them might be success, or 3 of them might be success and 1 of them might be a failure. The cards are then shuffled and turned over so you can't see which one, and you have to choose blindly which card you think has success on. If you choose correctly, you will then get the weapon and maybe even a buff to go with it. If you choose unwisely and you choose wrong, you will get a consequence, which can be pretty bad. So there's a lot of RNG in this game, but it's still fun. Don't let that put you off, because the game is still fun. So as you go around the board, clicking on these cards with each turn, your guy's represented by this bronze figure as he goes round. You might get ambushed. One of the cards might be called ambush, and then the dealer will say, right, you've been ambushed. And he will then draw monster cards, and the monster cards show you what type of monster is going to ambush you and how many of them there are, represented by the number. So maybe 3 of dust will mean you're going to get ambushed by 3, and I think the dust ones are bandits, the low crappy monsters, easy to dispatch. And then what happens is it goes to the actual real-time combat. Your guy gets kitted out by what cards you've so far found. So if you've found a really good sword and shield, you will get equipped with that sword and shield. And the great thing is, it's all visually represented on your guy. I mean, you always start off with the basic equipment, which is just a shitty axe. But if you found the good stuff, you'll see him with a really good sword and a really good shield. And then the combat is really well done. It's so fluid and looks great. The sound effects is great as well. It does look as though it would be much better using a game controller than a mouse and keyboard. I'm using mouse and keyboard, but I kind of wish I had a controller when I play this, because I can't turn in like an analog way. I can only go up, down, left and right, which is a shame. But with a controller having the analog thumbsticks, it's probably going to be better, and it does support a controller, so if you have a controller you're laughing with this, but it's still very playable with a mouse and keyboard, don't get me wrong. Also in the battle, at the bottom left you can see some cards. Now these represent your health, your money, your gold and your equipment, so you have to keep an eye on that because you don't want to lose too much health or you'll die. Now every time, once you've won the little battle and you go back to the board, every move you make you will restore 5 health to yourself, but you will lose 1 food, and you can see there's a card there for food. Now you don't want to be running out of food, so you have to make sure you take enough food into the dungeon with you. You will get food as you go around if you've got cards in, like one of the cards is a maiden, and when you land on the maiden card you can choose whether you get supplies, gold or weapons, I think it is. And if you choose supplies, she'll give you a couple of cards which one might have 2 food on, one might have 5 food on. Again, it's all RNG, but you will get food. There's various shops that you'll come across as you go around, because you collect gold as you kill things or find treasure chests, and you can go to a shop, you can sell weapons that you don't need, you can buy weapons, you can buy buffs, you can get healed. There's a whole host of things you can buy at the shops whilst you're on your travels around the dungeon. So it's a really good adventure as you're going into these dungeons, and each dungeon can last 20-30 minutes, no problem at all, especially if you're reading all the story, which is really neat as well. The voiceover is really good as well. It's done by a guy called Anthony Scordy, who's quite a versatile actor. He does a really good job. He nails this part for sure.
Given how rarely one encounters the folk, you are fortunate indeed to meet Merith again. Or perhaps we are merely cycling around the wheel and dipping into the same memories time and time again.
So it's all about the cards that you get and the cards that you choose to take with you on your dungeon crawl. Some weapons, for example, do better against certain types of monster, and if you know you're fighting that kind of monster in the dungeon, then obviously you want to take the right weapon, because there's a whole host of different monsters that you fight and bosses. And the boss fights are quite hectic as well. Lots of different abilities that the bosses have. It's quite an intense experience, and the music's great as well in the game. So is the sound effects. It all sounds good. But the crucial thing is it's the cards. It's all about the cards that you choose. Trying to choose good cards. Obviously, you don't want a card that says, have your balls chewed on by an angry bulldog. You know, I mean, obviously they're not as obvious as that, but some of the cards you can just tell they're going to be fucking bad. So you have to be careful what cards you take, and you're playing against your own deck, essentially. So again, RNG, getting together a good deck. So that's Hand of Fate. I'm only a little way into the game, but I'm really enjoying it. It's $18.99. It is not the cheapest of games, but it's great fun, and I do highly recommend that you buy it, because it's going to give you a lot of pleasure, a lot of replayable value here, and it's a really nice, innovative game from an indie developer. Well worth supporting, well worth playing, definitely worth a buy.